On this day, the 23rd of January, 1719, the Principality of Liechtenstein is created by an imperial decree. Charles VI, the Holy Roman Emperor, does this for his friend, advisor, and loyal servant, Hans Adam I, Prince of Liechtenstein. The Liechtensteins were a powerful aristocratic landed family that held land in Austria, Moravia, Silesia, and elsewhere. They had palaces in Vienna and were very much a part of the imperial court in Vienna. Unfortunately for them, they were a family with a lot of land and wealth and influence, but they didn't have a title or lands that would qualify them to sit in the imperial diet. The imperial diet was a place where princes and lords and kings and the emperor and electors would go, and they had a lot of influence over policies of the empire. And it was also a prestige thing as well. Imagine having a seat in the imperial diet. But because they had no lands themselves, that didn't have an overlord, it meant that they couldn't qualify to be a member of the imperial diet. Most of their lands were held in fief to the Habsburgs. So the Habsburgs were like the Margrave of Moravia, the Duke of Silesia, the Grand Duke of Austria, and they were counts of Tyrol and Styria, and kings of Austria, kings of Bohemia. They held lots of titles. These were their hereditary titles. The imperial title was an elected one, and if you had direct loyalty to the emperor, it meant you could have a seat in the imperial diet. If you had indirect, even if it was the same person, the Habsburgs, but you're loyal to the Margrave or the Duke or the Archduke or the King, you have a problem. You don't qualify. So this was something that the Liechtensteins wanted to amend. So in 1699, Hans Adam purchased the lordship of Schellenberg. In 1712, he purchased the county of Vaduz. Now Schellenberg is tiny. Vaduz is almost all of what is now Liechtenstein. But with these two pieces of land, he had the possibility of being raised to a prince in his own right. After helping out the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles VI, in a war, Charles decided to raise the Liechtenstein, Hans Adam, to prince. And with this bit of land, he could have a principality, which would mean he would now be eligible for a seat on the imperial diet. So, on the 23rd of January, Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, decreed the creation of the Principality of Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein being the name of the family rather than the territory, which is unusual because usually you take the name of the territory as your name instead of putting your name on the territory. tell you how unimportant Liechtenstein was to the Liechtenstein family, you only have to look at the fact that it was 99 years before any reigning prince bothered to even visit the Principality. The only reason Liechtenstein was created was to give them a seat in the imperial diet. However, 100 years after the creation of their principality, things changed in the world. Napoleon arrived, the French Revolution happened before that, and things went all chaotic. Liechtensteins who lived in Vienna and were loyal to the Holy Roman Emperors and then the Austrian emperors were on the losing side in the wars. Liechtenstein became a part of the Confederation of the Rhine after the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, which meant the dissolution of the Imperial Diet. But they still had a seat in the Confederation of the Rhine, which was overseen by Napoleon as the head of it. After him came the German Confederation. But that itself would end in 1866. So in 1866, Liechtenstein was left alone, and after German reunification, they were very alone. They had only Austria to rely on, and Liechtenstein, as I said, it was only created to give the Liechtensteins a seat in the imperial diet. They had no real use for the principality anymore. Many maps from the era don't even show Liechtenstein as separate from Austria, because it was so integrated into the empire, and the Liechtensteins themselves were so involved in the government of Austria. Again, things would change. The disaster of the First World War shattered the Austrian Empire. And that meant that suddenly this little piece of land could be quite handy. It would give the Liechtensteins sovereign immunity. It would mean that they would be equal amongst the states of the world, but not quite yet. They didn't seem to understand completely the little treasure they had. In 1919, Liechtenstein went into a customs union and monetary union with Switzerland. So they gave up Austria, because that had been a disaster, and they went to Switzerland. And in 1938, just after the Germans annexed Austria, that was when the reigning prince, went to live in Liechtenstein. A very sensible move, considering what was about to happen. The Second World War was in many ways even more of a disaster for the Liechtensteins, because most of their land was seized afterwards. Communist governments in Czechoslovakia and in Poland seized the lands of Liechtenstein, and in Austria they also lost much of their lands and territories. All they had left was their little valley in the Alps. There was one point at which they did something quite good. They had some Russian refugees. They were Cossacks, and they had fought on the German side. Bad decision. And they fled in to Liechtenstein. The Soviets demanded that Liechtenstein hand them over, and they refused. And they managed to get them out of the country down to South America. So that was one good thing they did. A couple of hundred men saved from the gulags. But since then, since the Second World War, Liechtenstein has gone on to become one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Well, not really a country, a state. And the Principality, which was so unimportant that the Liechtensteins didn't bother turning up for the first 100 years, is now their full-time home. And a source of their 3.5 billion fortune. So the moral of the story, if you have a little slice of land in the mountains, keep it in your back pocket, because you never know when it's going to come in handy. If you like these videos, come back for more tomorrow. Like, subscribe, and comment.